How many times have you wondered why you were born precisely in the family you're in? Why do you have such strong bonds with certain people and, at the same time, almost inexplicable difficulties with others? Is all of this the result of chance, of a cosmic lottery, or is there a greater order conducting every detail of our existence? According to the teachings of the spirits revealed to Allan Kardec, nothing is random. Before diving into the physical body, each soul participates in a process of choices and commitments that will define their next incarnation. They choose their parents, siblings, trials, and even reunions with those souls that mark our lives so intensely that they transform our destiny. But the truth is that this revelation causes discomfort. Because if there is no luck, it means that even the most difficult homes, the most challenging relationships, and the deepest pains were assumed by ourselves as part of a greater plan of evolution. What seems unfair, in reality, may be the exact point where the soul finds its chance for liberation. And there is something even more surprising. Before being born, many spirits reunite with their twin souls. Not as a fairy tale, but as a silent pact, where one of them may remain in the spiritual plane, supporting the other from a distance, while both commit to staying firm until the inevitable reunion. In this video, you will learn in detail what happens before reincarnation. You will understand how the choice of parents and destiny is not punishment, but opportunity. You will discover the reason for forgetting, the meaning of vibrational descent, and above all, you will realize that nothing in your life is by chance. Each person, each pain, and each affection has deep roots in the spiritual plane. When earthly existence comes to an end, the soul does not cross a void, but rather a passage. Freeing itself from the body, it awakens in a reality that is not new, but that has always been present, although veiled by material senses. It is led by friendly hands, by those who have already understood the path, to a welcoming environment where truth cannot be disguised. It is at this point that the spirit is taken to the so-called Hall of Memories, a symbolic and profound space, where memories of all lives become accessible. There are no shadows to cover errors, nor exaggerations to magnify virtues. The spirit contemplates what it did and also what it failed to do. Each word, each gesture, each silence that wounded, everything returns like waves that reach consciousness again. Unlike what many believe, it is not an external tribunal that sentences. The soul itself, when looking at its trajectory, clearly recognizes the beauty of some acts and the weight of others. It is the intimate confrontation with one's own history. In this review, the soul perceives that the moments when it chose love were luminous seeds that still vibrate. It also perceives the instance when, out of selfishness, pride, or fear, it created pain in itself and in others. And this realization is not accompanied by eternal condemnation, but by a truth that cries out for reparation. It is as if consciousness said, "There are steps that still need to be climbed. There are lessons that have not yet been learned." What on earth seems simple or even forgotten, now appears before spiritual eyes with unquestionable force. The revelation that takes place in this hall is simultaneously liberating and demanding. Liberating because it shows that nothing is lost, that there is always a chance to continue. Demanding because it places before the spirit the responsibility to continue learning. The soul feels the urgency of progress, understands that it cannot stagnate, that time is precious and that eternity is not made of rest, but of movement, of transformation, of continuous construction. At this moment, many spirits report a mixture of feelings. On one side, the relief of perceiving that life does not end, that death does not exist as an end. On the other, the intensity of recognizing that what was left undone needs to be resumed in new effort. It is a state of absolute sincerity, where no excuse can be invoked, because spiritual memory clearly reveals everything that was tried to be hidden from oneself during life. It is at this point that the awakening to the need for a new path emerges. The spirit is not forced to anything, but feels within that it needs to advance. Some discover interrupted bonds that ask for reconciliation. Others perceive talents that were buried and need to flourish. Others still understand that they cultivated relationships of hatred or contempt that can only be pacified in close coexistence. And all, without exception, realize that life is school, and that each return to the material world is an invitation to learning. The spiritual mentors, who accompany with patience and love, help the spirit organize these perceptions. They do not impose choices, but illuminate possibilities. They show possible paths for reparation, present circumstances in which the spirit can overcome pride, surpass vanity, develop patience, or exercise forgiveness. And it is in this dialogue, silent yet profound, that the spirit begins to understand that it is not before a punishment, but before an opportunity. The Hall of Memories, therefore, is the starting point of a new cycle. The soul that awakens there knows that soon it will need to decide what its next experience will be. It will be necessary to choose a new family, a new body, a new script of trials and joys. Nothing will be imposed by chance, because the universe does not work with blind lotteries, but with the precision of the law of cause and effect. The final moment, in truth, is only the threshold of a new choice that approaches, and the soul begins to prepare for an inevitable reunion with those who will serve as guides and companions in the journey that lies ahead. Upon leaving the Hall of Memories, the spirit does not remain solitary before its own reflections. It is supported by mentors who understand the necessity of each soul and the complexity of the paths that intertwine. The next stage is decisive, choosing the home where it will be reborn. This is not about chance or luck, but about a selection made with consciousness and responsibility, because each reunion on the earthly plane has a spiritual purpose. Many believe that being born into a particular family is merely the result of biological coincidences. But the teachings of Spiritist doctrine reveal something much greater. The bonds that unite parents and children often come from long before the cradle. They may be encounters of love, when kindred souls draw near to grow together, or they may be reparative reunions, when hearts marked by past disagreements agree to live together again so that forgiveness can finally be cultivated. The spirit, then, is invited to analyze the possibilities presented to it. Before it appeared different scenarios. A home of tenderness, where it can find the necessary support to develop its talents. A family of difficult trials, where old adversaries await reconciliation. Or even an environment marked by indifference, which will impel it to learn to walk with autonomy and to value the bonds that truly matter. Each choice involves courage, because the spirit knows that, when diving into matter, it will temporarily forget these decisions and face pains with the sensation that they arose unexpectedly. It is not uncommon for souls that were enemies in the past to reunite in Earth's most intimate bond, that of motherhood and fatherhood. What seemed like insurmountable hatred can transform into an opportunity for profound reconciliation, because family life brings together, unites, demands tolerance, and opens space for love to flourish where once there was resentment. The spirit that today accepts being born as the child of one who was once its adversary understands that this is the safest way to dissolve centuries of disharmony. At the same time, there are also reunions of tenderness. Parents and children who have already loved each other in other existences may choose to return together, further strengthening the bonds of affection. In these cases, life together is a bond that sustains each one in their individual struggles. True love, when reunited, is not exempt from difficulties, but offers sufficient strength to overcome the inevitable challenges of earthly life. And not only parents are chosen. The spirit also prepares for the encounters it will have throughout life, siblings, spouses, friends, and even those who will bring severe trials. All are inserted into a larger context, in a script of learning that aims for the progress of each one. Contrary to what one might think, there are no arbitrary punishments. What exists is the chance to settle old accounts, to restore bonds, to learn to love in ways that previously seemed impossible. The spiritual mentors, in this process, present to the spirit the implications of each choice. They show how childhood will be, what difficulties the family environment will present, what social challenges it will face. They also show the support points, the growth opportunities, the doors that will open if the soul maintains perseverance. The spirit conscious chooses. And this choice is an act of tremendous responsibility, because each decision will shape the trajectory of the next existence. Thus, being born into an apparently hostile home may be the greatest proof of courage that a soul has ever faced. While, on the other hand, being born into a loving home may be the necessary impulse for dormant talents to flourish for the benefit of the collective. In both cases, there is no chance. There is learning, there is opportunity. There is the greater law that guides all destinies, the law of progress. And so, in the silence of the spiritual planes, decisions are made. Decisions that, to human eyes, will often seem unjust or incomprehensible, but that, seen from the perspective of eternity, prove to be profoundly just and necessary. The spirit, then, no longer finds itself only before itself, but before those with whom it will share a new story. And in this scenario of preparation, even more subtle and mysterious encounters emerge, which are not limited to family bonds, but reach the depth of promises made long before birth. Among the preparations that precede the return to the physical body, there are moments of reunions that touch the spirit profoundly. It is not always just about choosing parents or siblings, but about a more intimate and eternal connection, the presence of the twin soul. Not in the romantic and idealized sense often found in human stories, but as a spiritual reality where two consciousnesses, created to complement each other, meet to sustain one another in their trajectories. The twin soul is not a prize, nor a reward destined for those who suffer. It is a vibrational counterpart, a being that shares the same essence core and that, at some point in the journey, crosses paths again to propel mutual growth. On some occasions, this reunion happens on Earth, when both decide to dive together into the material experience, supporting each other in the challenges of life together. At other times, only one of them returns, while the other remains in the spiritual plane, serving as invisible support, strengthening it in the hours of greatest trial. The pact between these souls is not made of solemn words, but of silent understanding. A look of recognition, a subtle grip of energy, a promise that need not be verbalized. It is a commitment made in tears and hope, where one is willing to face earthly pains with the certainty that, at some point along the way, it will feel the loving vibration of the other, even if it does not recognize it clearly. Often, the reunion of twin souls does not happen as human imagination would like. They do not always meet in perfect romances or lasting unions. Sometimes they assume different roles, one as father, the other as daughter, one as sister, the other as distant friend. What matters is not the form, but the essence of the connection. Wherever they are, they carry within them a magnetism that attracts them, even when social roles seem to separate them. When the physical encounter occurs, there is a peculiar sensation, difficult to explain by reason. It is as if life, for moments, revealed its true continuity. An affection that is not built in days or months, but that comes from centuries. This force, however, does not mean there are no conflicts. On the contrary, twin souls, when united in the physical body, may bring to the surface old wounds that need to be healed. The deep love that unites them is not a guarantee of ease, but of a greater impulse to face the necessary trials. And when separation happens? When only one of the souls decides to dive into the earthly experience, the other assumes the function of sustaining in the spiritual plane. It is as if it remained in the background of the stage, sending vibrations of courage and serenity. Many of the intuitions that arrive in moments of despair, many of the dreams that seem so real, are silent touches from the soul that, invisible to the eyes, never stops accompanying. This discreet but constant support is the link that prevents the spirit from becoming discouraged before the most intense struggles. This silent pact is, therefore, a promise of inevitable reunion. Sooner or later, on earth or beyond it, twin souls recognize and strengthen each other. Eternity is the space in which this love moves, and there is no force that can definitively separate what has been united since the origin. Even if they spend existences apart, even if social roles distance them, the essence of this connection remains intact, awaiting the right moment to flourish in fullness. However, before the spirit can dive into the experience of living again with its twin soul, there is still a necessary condition for rebirth, the temporary forgetting of previous memories. A protective veil that, upon enveloping consciousness, will allow new bonds to form without the paralyzing weight of the past. When preparing to dive once again into the physical body, the spirit faces one of the most delicate processes of incarnation, the veil of forgetting. It is not a loss, nor a punishment, but a necessary condition for the earthly experience to fulfill its function. For if, upon being born, the human being carried in clear memory all the errors, all the pains, all the grievances accumulated in previous existences, they would hardly bear the weight of their own history. Forgetting, therefore, is a resource of mercy. It protects the soul from living imprisoned by past resentments and wounds that still burn. Thanks to this veil, parents and children who in another life were enemies can live together as if nothing had happened, now having the chance to rebuild trust and affection. Spouses who in other times hurt each other mutually can reunite to relearn how to love, without old resentment paralyzing them. Forgetting is the instrument that allows forgiveness to flourish spontaneously, without the constant shadow of memory. This does not mean, however, that everything disappears. Memories remain dormant in the unconscious, and subtle signs persist. They are the instant sympathies and antipathies, the affinities that seem to exist from the first encounter, or the aversions that arise without apparent reason. They are echoes of ancient stories, records of the soul that, although not conscious, influence choices and feelings. When someone feels an overwhelming passion for a person they have just met, or when they find themselves seized by inexplicable distrust before another, they are, in truth, before the spiritual marks that have crossed time. The spirit, before reincarnating, accepts this condition. It knows that it will need to temporarily forget in order to live with freedom and, at the same time, with responsibility. Forgetting does not eliminate past tendencies, which remain engraved within. Already conquered virtues continue latent, ready to express themselves in new situations. Similarly, unconquered imperfections resurface as inclinations that will need to be mastered. What changes is that the soul does not have before it the full weight of memories, but only the reflexes that will guide it to where it needs to grow. This mechanism reveals divine wisdom. While the soul is protected from the suffering of remembering every detail, it is placed before circumstances that invite it to overcome its own limitations. Rancor, for example, is not remembered, but returns in the form of a trial of patience, where the spirit will have to choose to forgive or repeat the grievance. Thus, little by little, through experience lived in the present, the soul heals wounds from past existences. Some ask, why not remember, if memory could help avoid errors? But reality shows that simple rational knowledge is not enough to transform the heart. How many know what is right and still choose the wrong path? Forgetting is an opportunity for genuine renewal, where the soul learns not because it fears yesterday's consequences, but because it desires to build a better tomorrow. Even under this veil, some memories emerge in the form of dreams, intuitions, or quick impressions. They are flashes that do not disturb the present, but offer small confirmations that life is greater than the eyes can see. And when the spirit reaches a certain degree of maturation, it may have access to clearer memories, as occurs in reports of spontaneous regression or serious mediumship. But this only happens when there is sufficient maturity to deal with such revelations without becoming unbalanced. Programmed forgetting, therefore, is like a mantle that protects, but does not erase who we really are. It gives us the chance to begin again, to live with former adversaries as if they were new companions, and to love without the weight of accumulated grievances. However, even wrapped in this veil, the spirit is not free from another equally decisive stage, the vibrational approach to the body that begins to form. A profound and painful process, but also full of hope. When the time comes to materialize the decision made, the spirit prepares for one of the most intense moments of its journey, the approach to the forming body. Until then, everything was planning, reflection, and choice. Now, it is the definitive dive into the earthly experience. Guided by the mentors who assist it, the soul approaches the chosen home, perceiving that destiny is already taking shape before it. The vibrational descent is a complex process, because the spirit, in its essence, maintains a more subtle, lighter vibration, the result of achievements already reached in its journey. Approaching dense matter is like adjusting its frequency to a heavier field, where perceptions become limited and freedom is restricted. Many describe this transition as a shock, a gradual reduction of one's own forces, to the point where consciousness accepts living confined in the fragile body that develops in the maternal womb. But this is not meaningless imprisonment. This dive is also an act of hope. Each tear of tenderness from the mother, each thought of affection from the future parents, shapes the atmosphere that will welcome the soul in its new journey. Even when the earthly environment seems hostile, The mentors work incessantly to protect this moment, enveloping both the spirit and the family in vibrations of balance and courage. Upon feeling attracted to the embryo, the soul perceives the reduction of its broad perception. Before, it saw itself surrounded by vast horizons, could remember clearly, could move freely. Now, little by little, it feels the narrowing. There is no revolt, because it understands the purpose of this process. It is like an artist who accepts entering the stage with a specific role, knowing that this role is the opportunity to express itself and to grow. This descent is accompanied by subtle magnetic connections. The spirit gradually connects to the forming cells, adjusting its energy to the new body that emerges. Every detail is accompanied by the mentors, who ensure that the connection is made harmoniously. In this process, the future child begins to feel, still unconsciously, the bonds of affection or challenge it will have with its parents and family members. It is a silent encounter, but loaded with meaning, for from the beginning the story that will come is already being drawn. Often, the spirit also perceives the presence of others who accompany it. Spiritual friends who wish it courage, adversaries who observe from a distance, souls who cheer for its victory. Incarnation is not an isolated act, it is a collective event, in which many participate, each with their degree of involvement. That birth will be a meeting point, of reunions, of rescues, and of new constructions. Gradually, the soul's vibration adapts to the physical body. This reduction may be painful, but it is also illuminated by the certainty that new possibilities are found there. If before freedom was broad, now confinement offers the opportunity to transform intentions into attitudes, to make learning a concrete practice. It is in the fragile body, subject to time, that the spirit will have the chance to refine itself with greater intensity. Destiny is not completely closed. The script was outlined, yes, but within it there is space for choices, for deviations, for the exercise of free will. The spirit brings with it a mission, specific trials, planned reunions, but the way it will deal with each situation will depend on its intimate disposition. It is this freedom that transforms each incarnation into a unique adventure, where the spirit can accelerate or delay its march, can transform pain into wisdom or repeat the same mistakes until it learns. And so, upon completing the vibrational descent, the spirit finds itself definitively connected to the new body. Gestation continues, the veil of forgetting is already active, and life on earth awaits it with its joys and challenges. The chosen bonds, the silent pacts, the outlined trials, and the programmed encounters begin to align in time. The story that was prepared in the spiritual planes is ready to manifest, awaiting only the moment of birth to begin a new chapter in the eternal journey of the soul. Now that you understand what happens before reincarnation, it is impossible to look at life the same way. If each encounter, each pain, and each reunion has roots and choices made by the soul itself, what can you do today to honor this planning? How can you transform conflicts into learning, resentments into forgiveness, and difficulties into opportunities for growth? Isn't it time to look at your family with different eyes? Could it be that those people who most challenge you are precisely the instruments chosen for your evolution? And the affections that sustain you, could they not be reunions of love that have crossed centuries to be by your side again? Life is not chance. Every detail is connected to a greater purpose. And the great question is, will you continue living as if everything were blind destiny, or will you assume, once and for all, the commitment to transform each experience into an opportunity for evolution? If this content brought light to your heart and opened new horizons for your spiritual understanding, subscribe to the channel now and activate notifications. This way, you will continue receiving deep reflections on spirituality, reincarnation, and life after death, which will help you better understand yourself and your journey. Because knowledge only has value when it is put into practice. And your life, today, can be the first step toward a transformation that was already written in your spirit long ago.